Hello, welcome to YHELPtalk with William. Today, we're here with Tammy Carter, mental health therapist and owner of Life by Design Therapeutic Solutions, discussing domestic violence awareness. So can you please tell us about yourself and your organization?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. Life by Design Therapeutic Solutions is a virtual only, at least for the time being, virtual only mental health clinic where we offer mental health services, individual counseling, group counseling, family counseling, couples counseling, consultations and workshops for people across the mental health spectrum, people that want to make some changes or improvements in their lives, people that are having, phase of life transitions, etc. And we've technically been around since 2020, but right now we are operating on a full-time basis and have been accepting referrals from, anyone who needs those types of services. We serve Virginia residents and take all major insurance and all that kind of good stuff. So if you are out there and need some services, or need a referral for services, case management help, anything like that, Life by Design is here to help you.
Wow, that's awesome. So can you define domestic violence and the different types?
Sure. Okay. Domestic violence or domestic abuse, whichever word you want to use, they're interchangeable. It's basically a type of behavior. It refers to a type of behavior. Behaviors in which a person chooses to hurt, terrorize, gain control of, manipulate, otherwise control a family member or someone that they're in some sort of intimate partnership or relationship with.
Okay. Does domestic violence impact all genders and ages? That's another question I have for you.
Absolutely. Domestic violence impacts all genders, all ages, all classes. There are no excluded people that can be impacted by domestic violence. It can be perpetrated by any member of the household. So, it can be perpetrated from a parent to a child. It can also be perpetrated from a child to a parent, siblings against siblings, other relatives, sometimes even, caregivers, staff members, depending on the situation. When it deals with people that are in an intimate or romantic relationship, it's also called intimate partner violence. And when the victim of the domestic violence is a child, it's also referred to as child abuse. But like I said, there are no people or classes that are exempt from experiencing domestic violence. However, statistically speaking, people that are marginalized, people from marginalized groups tend to be at a higher risk of experiencing domestic violence.
Well, what can someone that's listening do if they're in an unhealthy relationship? Do you have any tips or advice for that?
Well, sure. First and foremost, if you are the victim of domestic violence, one of the things you can do is try to develop a safety plan, depending on the degree of domestic violence. The thing is about domestic violence, not everyone that is involved in one of those situations wants to or is willing to leave or separate themselves. Some people don't have the ability to do that. So if the partner that is inflicting the violence is willing to change, there are things that both the abused person and the person inflicting the abuse can do to change the pattern of behavior. If that is not a possibility, however, and the person who is being abused just needs help in the situation, etc., most communities have some sort of domestic violence shelter, some sort of programs where you can leave a domestic situation. You can be relocated to a shelter that is anonymous in terms of its location, so it's not readily known, so that if your abuser tried to come after you or find you, they would have a hard time doing so. There are domestic violence hotlines that some communities have, and there's actually a national domestic violence hotline, and the number for that is 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. They can give you confidential assistance with domestic violence issues from people who are trained to handle these types of things and possibly help you with resources. And obviously, the easiest thing to do if you find yourself in a domestic violence encounter and you need immediate help, you can always call 911. And then you tell the person, the dispatcher on the phone, what's going on. And usually more often than not, they will dispatch someone to your location to help defuse the situation, remove the perpetrator, etc.
Thank you for sharing that and sharing that number as well. How can you support someone that's in an unhealthy relationship, though?
Okay. Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons, first and foremost, why domestic violence happens. And I think if you're trying to truly support someone, one of the things that has to happen is if you have a relationship with a person, understanding how this came to be and understanding how this could be impacting the person that is being victimized in this way. Sometimes people that are victims of domestic violence, they think that they did something to deserve the abuse. They feel like it's their fault. They feel guilty. They feel ashamed. They feel like they don't have any power in the situation. They're scared. They're terrified to do something that's going to make their situation worse. They may be having all manner of mental health problems. They may be having all types of physical problems because of the abuse that's being inflicted. They may not feel that they can make a decision or do things to be on their own. They may doubt themselves. So even though they want to leave, they don't know how. They don't feel like they're strong enough to do so. So if someone is going to be supportive of a person experiencing domestic violence, the thing to do is to understand all those things that I just said are normal. Those feelings in a situation where there's domestic violence are normal. You're not necessarily going to be able to talk the person out of feeling that way or in that way. Your job as a supporter is really just to listen to the person, believe what they're saying, understand that this is where they are in their process, not trying to push them to adopt your viewpoint or your opinions about things. Being there, just letting them know they're not alone, that they have support, that there's someone who can help them. If the person is looking to leave or, looking to take some sort of legal action, etc., sometimes it's helpful to have them recount everything that they can remember about the timeline of events so that they can use that later to get, ring orders or things like that if they're going to pursue some sort of legal action. Reminding them it's not their fault is helpful. And then definitely, once they are in a safer situation, helping them to get that professional support that they need, whether it be through a hotline, whether it be through a therapist like myself or some other means. And also, if they need medical attention, helping them to get that too.
Okay. And that kind of goes into my next question, which was, how can domestic violence impact someone's mental health?
Well, again, self-esteem gets undermined a lot because you don't trust yourself. You don't feel good about yourself if someone is constantly putting their hands on you or making you feel less than. You may start to believe those things. You may start to believe that what is being said about you or the things that are being done to you, that these things are happening because you deserve it. Again, not all domestic violence is physical in nature. Some of it is. There's slapping, beating, kicking, punching, those types of things, yes. And there's also sexual abuse that can be a part of domestic violence as well, which is, any type of touching that it's not consensual. But there's also emotional abuse. So the yelling, screaming, cursing at a person, calling them names, bullying them, gaslighting them constantly, threatening them constantly. Those types of things do a number on someone's self-esteem, and they don't feel that they have any power. They feel as though a lot of times they're just in this situation and that there's no way out. Neglect is also a part of domestic violence. And depending on what kind of neglect we're talking about, physical neglect, that's when you have the medical complications, because realistically, if you're depriving someone of food, of water, of shelter, of clothing, things like that, proper supervision, those types of neglectful situations can put you in a space where your physical being is malnourished or not in the best condition. And when your physical being is not well taken care of, it also impacts your mental. Financially, if you're withholding, if a user is withholding money, withholding finances, you don't necessarily have the means to take care of yourself. And again, if you're restricted in that way, it can undermine your self-esteem and make you feel as though you are not capable or that you're further behind your peers. A lot of comparisons, things like that. So all of those types of abuse can lead to various mental health problems, but common denominator issues: self-esteem, fear, shame, guilt, just lost sense of self-worth, lost sense of purpose, lost sense of identity, maybe attachment issues, meaning depending on who the abuse is being inflicted by. If you're a child and this is happening and your parent is the abuser, You don't necessarily learn how to form positive relationships that can have a long-lasting impact on you, even after you get out of the situation. People that have been abused tend to be shy, meek, apologetic. They shrink away from people. A lot of times when abuse is happening, people isolate, they withdraw, they don't nurture their relationships because they can't. It's not safe for them to do so. So they're nervous, they're hypervigilant, they're always looking around, always concerned about what's going to happen, very concerned about everything that they say or do. They walk on eggshells a lot. So all of these things have a tremendous impact on a person that's been abused, not just necessarily during the abuse, but even for years afterwards, especially if there's no aftercare given, if there's no mental health support after the fact, so that they can unlearn some of these behaviors that they learned during that abusive experience.
If someone has committed domestic violence, what can they do to get help?
Okay. Well, there are programs for the victims of domestic violence, there are also programs and services for perpetrators of domestic violence. If a person is interested in changing, they're typically called batterers groups, things like that, where for physical violence, at least, one can learn how to communicate more effectively, how to control anger, how to manage anger, control your temper in such a way that you don't lash out at people, figure out what the reasoning behind the abuse was, because a lot of times it's not about whatever issue is happening in the moment. There's more to it than that. Sometimes there are cultural factors involved. A lot of cultures, involve patriarchy, and, women are sometimes subjected to these types of abusive situations. So, cultural re-education, that's something that can help. Sometimes economic factors, the stress of not having or not being able to make ends meet, things like that can make people more volatile. So sometimes holistic services that address all these things, the cultural piece, the economic piece, the environmental piece, the social piece, if there's substance abuse involved, making sure that the person is sober and, no longer using addictive substances that can alter behaviors. All of those services are available for people who have a history of perpetrating domestic violence. Typically, the services are separated, though. So if a person has been a perpetrator of domestic violence, they're not necessarily going to be in the same support group as a person who is a victim of domestic violence. So there is separation, simply because it can be very triggering to a person who's been a victim of domestic violence to have to interact with someone who perpetrated it, even if it wasn't their perpetrator. But there are lots of services out there for people who have found themselves involved and are on the wrong side of a domestic abuse case.
Okay. Well, in light of all that's been discussed, how can someone have hope after a domestic violence situation?
Okay. Well, I think that's a little bit of a complicated question, William. And the only reason I say that is because a lot of this stuff is individualized. It depends on what you've gone through. It depends on where you are in your healing process. It depends on the support system that you have around you. In the best case scenario, you have people in your life that love you, that care about you, that will walk you through your healing journey, that will be there alongside you when you have bad days. Ideally, you will have access to support, whether it be support groups, an individual therapist, medical care, medication, safe housing, all the basic needs that you haven't be met, so that you can attend to just your healing process. When those other things are in place, it makes it much easier to deal with the psychological damage that abuse can cause. So realistically, it really does depend on what circumstances you find yourself in on the other side of an abusive relationship. In the best cases, having support, having someone who's there for you, having someone who can tell you, and you start to eventually believe that it wasn't your fault, that you didn't deserve it because nobody does, and normalizing all the feelings and thoughts that you have after having endured such a thing and helping you to resolve those things over time. That's the best case scenario for a survivor of abuse who has access to resources.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And are there any domestic violence resources that someone can refer to for assistance?
Well, sure. Like I said, the hotline number that I already gave, most communities, especially in the kind of area that we live in, we have community services boards, which are basically boards that offer mental health services, substance abuse services, all types of services. If you were to call the emergency services number that's affiliated with any of them, as a domestic violence survivor, someone who's trying to get out of that situation, or someone who's been perpetrating it and needs help, they can possibly give you referral information or get you an appointment within their organization. Hotlines, the national one and other ones that are available, can help you find resources. There are shelters, domestic violence shelters specifically for survivors of domestic violence, where you can go with your family if need be to escape a unsafe situation. Again, calling 911 is a emergency type of thing when you're in immediate danger. Survivors can absolutely always use 911 as a resource. And then sometimes just talking to people, whether it be people in your community, people in your school, people in your church, using community resources, letting someone else know what's going on so that they can help you, so that they can connect you with resources. Even if you don't know where to go yourself, chances are somebody in your community may. And it's just a question of opening up enough to tell them what's going on so that they can give you some support and lead you to where you need to be to get some healing.
I have one final question for you, and that's how can anyone follow and support Life by Design? Like, what are the ways that they can do that?
Okay, well, Life by Design, we have our own website, and it is www.lifebydesignva.com. So our website is live. You can always go to our website and check things out. We're on all the social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. So you can find us there. And my phone number and email address, all those types of things are readily available on the website and on the social media platform. So if anyone wanted to speak to me directly about services, trainings, etc., all they have to do is go through one of those websites or media platforms, and they can get in touch.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and I want to thank everyone listening for tuning in to YHELPtalk. Please go to YHELPnow.com and follow @YHELPnow for more information about mental health and life skills.